The moment Adesio Konko realized her sister had robbed her, she was standing barefoot on the cracked tile floor of the kitchen, still wearing the same faded yellow dress she'd slept in, staring at the empty drawer where she kept everything that mattered. The lottery ticket was gone, not misplaced, not fallen behind the cabinet, gone, and the only other person who had ever touched that drawer, the only other person who had a key to that apartment, the only person in the world Adaise had trusted with every quiet, desperate corner of her life was her older sister, Ngozi. Let that sink in for a moment. Let the weight of it press down on your chest, the way it pressed down on Adaise's that Tuesday morning in Lagos, when the radio was still playing and the egusi soup she'd left on the stove the night before had gone cold, and she stood there with her hand inside an empty drawer, understanding with the kind of clarity that only arrives when betrayal is complete and total, that her sister had come in the night and taken the one thing that was supposed to change everything. But to understand how deep that wound went, you have to go all the way back to when it started, because this story did not begin with a lottery ticket. It began the way all great betrayals begin, slowly, quietly, dressed in the clothes of love. Adaise was the younger of the two Okonkwo sisters by 5 years. Their mother died when Adaise was 9 and Gozi was 14. And from that point forward, the family told the story of Gozi as a sacrifice, the older daughter, who gave up her youth to raise her little sister, who cooked and cleaned and scolded and loved, who was owed a debt she would never let anyone forget. That was the family's version, the community's version, the version that got repeated at every holiday table, at every gathering of aunties and cousins, at every moment a day's there to achieve something, without first kneeling at Ngozi's altar of resentment. But here is what the family never said out loud. Ngozi had not sacrificed herself. Ngozi had positioned herself. She had taken their mother's death and turned it into a permanent claim on every good thing Adaise would ever produce. When Adaise passed her secondary school exams with distinction, Ngozi reminded the room that she had paid for the study guides when Adaise got a secretarial job at a shipping company in Lagos and sent money home every month. Ngozi told the aunties that it was her discipline that had shaped Adaise into someone employable when Adele saved for 2 years to rent her own apartment, a small decent place in Surulere with a window that caught the evening breeze. Josie moved in within 3 months, bringing her loud phone calls and her boyfriend, who smelled of cheap gin, and her complete, unshakable certainty that whatever Adaise owned was by ancient and unspoken right also hers. Adaise let her stay. Of course she did. This is what people who have been trained into smallness do. They make room. They fold themselves into corners so others can spread out. She let Ngozi take the better bedroom. She cooked for both of them. Most evenings, she absorbed Ngozi's moods, the way old cloth absorbs water silently, completely without complaint. And Ngozi, for her part, perfected the art of receiving, without gratitude, of taking, without acknowledging. Instead of sitting at a table someone else had set and complaining about the seasoning the boyfriend, a man named Emeka, who wore his failure, like a cologne was a particular source of misery. He did not work. He borrowed. He spoke to Adaise like she was a piece of furniture that had developed the inconvenient habit of having opinions. Once, when she asked him to lower his voice during a late-night argument he was having with Ngozi in her apartment in her living room, he had looked at her with such contempt, such naked, unhurried contempt, and said, "Go and sleep, small girl." And Ngozi had laughed, not a nervous laugh, not a laugh that asked forgiveness. A genuine, bright, delighted laugh, as if her little sister's humiliation was a private joke they all shared. Adisa had gone to her room and sat on the edge of her bed and pressed her palms flat against her thighs and breathed slowly until the urge to cry passed. This is what she had learned to do. Not fight, not leave. Just breathe until the worst of it was over. She was 26 years old, supporting herself, supporting her sister, and the only person in the world she was supposed to be able to call Family had just laughed at her public diminution, but she breathed through it because Adaeze Okonkwo was the kind of woman who believed with the bone-deep stubbornness of the truly good that things eventually corrected themselves. She bought the lottery ticket on a Thursday on her way home from work, from the same kiosk she passed every day. Outside the main gate of the port, she bought one ticket as she sometimes did. Not with wild hope, but with the modest, almost shy belief that small chances were still chances. She tucked it into the drawer beside her identification cards and her mother's old photograph, and forgot about it for 3 days. On Sunday evening, she was watching the results broadcast on the neighbor's television when she heard the numbers. She did not scream. She checked them twice very carefully, the way a woman who has learned not to trust good fortune checks everything twice. Then she walked back to her apartment, took the ticket out of the drawer, held it under the kitchen light, and checked it a third time. The numbers were correct, every single one. Adaeze Okonkwo had won 40 million naira. She sat down on the kitchen floor, not from weakness, but because her legs simply stopped working, because something extraordinary had short-circuited the ordinary instruction between her brain and her body. And she sat there for a long time very quietly, with the ticket pressed against her chest, thinking about her mother, thinking about what 40 million naira meant, what it looked like in the shape of a life, a proper apartment, her own business. She'd always wanted a fabric shop, had always had the eye for it, had spent years sketching designs. In the margins of Randik's security space, rests the simple radical luxury of rest. She should have told no one. She told Ngozi not because she was naive. She was not naive, not after everything, but because Ngozi was her sister. Because at the deepest, most illogical, most human level, Adaeze still believed that good news shared with family was good news doubled. Because she still carried somewhere under all the years of being diminished, the 9-year-old girl who had held her older sister's hand at their mother's graveside and believed that the two of them, at least, would always be on the same side. I won. She said when Ngozi came into the kitchen that evening, she held up the ticket. Ngozi, I won the lottery 14 million. She would replay that moment for the rest of her life. The exact expression on Gucci's face in the first half. Second, before she controlled it, before the mask came up in that first half. Second, it was not joy. It was not even shock. It was something older and uglier, a flash of raw, corrosive envy that moved across her sister's face like a shadow across water gone almost before it arrived, replaced immediately by a wide practiced smile and open arms and the warm suffocating embrace of a woman who had just made a decision. 14 million Nyozi breathed into her shoulder. My God, Adaeze, my God, this is a blessing. I know, Adaeze said, still trembling. I know. She put the ticket back in the drawer. She and Nguzi stayed up late, talking about the future, and Adaeze talked about her fabric shop. And Nguzi nodded along and said all the right things, and by midnight they were laughing, the way they used to laugh when they were girls. And Adaeze went to bed feeling for the first time in years like maybe the weight was finally going to lift. She woke up at 5 inches the morning to the sound of the front door clicking shut. She thought nothing of it. Ngozi sometimes left early to visit a Mecca. She turned over and went back to sleep. She found out at 9:30 when she reached into the drawer. Gone. The ticket was gone. Her identification cards were still there. Her mother's photograph was still there. Everything was exactly as she'd left it, except for the single item that was worth 14 million naira. And Ngozi's phone was off. And when Adaeze took a taxi to Emeka's place and knocked on the door, until her knuckles hurt, the neighbor told her that Ngozi and her man had packed 2 bags the previous night and left before dawn in a hired car. She filed a report with the police. This is the part of the story that will make you furious. Not because the police did nothing, although they did nothing, but because of what one officer said to her with genuine patient condescension, as if explaining a simple thing to a slow child. Madam, how do you prove the ticket was yours? Do you have a photo, a receipt with your name? It is your word against your sister's. Adais did not have a photo. She had not thought to take a photo of a lottery ticket because it had not occurred to her that she needed to defend herself against her own blood. She went home, she sat in the kitchen, and then she did the only thing left to do. She got up, went to work on Monday morning, and she did not cry, not where anyone could see Ngozi meanwhile. She did what greedy people always do when they suddenly have more money than conscience. She moved fast catastrophically, fatally fast. She claimed the winnings within 48 hours, presenting herself at the lottery office with the ticket and a smile. And that particular brand of brazen, unapologetic confidence that belongs exclusively to people who have decided that wanting something badly enough makes it theirs. She gave them a Daisy's ticket and walked out with 14 million naira, and felt in that moment like a woman who had finally received what the universe owed her, because this is the thing you must understand about Ngozi. She did not experience what she had done as theft. She experienced it as correction. In the calculus of her own interior world. She was old, she had been old for years. All those years of being the older one, the responsible one, the one who had held the family together. While Adais got to be young and soft and loved, she had been building a debt in her sister's name, without Adais's knowledge or consent. And now she was simply collecting the lottery ticket was not stolen. It was a settlement. This is the psychology of the truly greedy. They do not see themselves as thieves. They see themselves as creditors. And this delusion is what makes them dangerous and what makes what comes next so absolutely devastatingly deserved. And she bought the villa within 2 weeks. Not an apartment, not a modest house in a decent neighborhood. A villa, a 5-bedroom property on the outskirts of a gated development in the lake area. The kind of place that appeared in property magazines between ads for luxury cars and international schools. The listing had described it as recently renovated, exclusively priced, immediate occupancy available, and Ngozi had seen the photographs. The marble floors, the curved staircase, the garden with its manicured hedges and something animal and long-starved in her. And had opened its mouth wide. The price was 13 million naira. She paid it in cash through a middleman she'd found. Through a maker, because the seller had indicated a preference for discreet transactions and had been very insistent that the deal be concluded quickly before any other buyers could move. She signed papers. She did not read carefully enough. She handed over the money she was given a key, and she began planning her housewarming. She posted photographs on every platform. She owned the gate, the driveway, the staircase herself in a new dress. Standing in the doorway of her new kitchen, caption, "Favor found me, God is good." She tagged her aunties. She tagged cousins. She tagged people she had not spoken to in years. People from secondary school, people from the neighborhood, where she and Adis had grown up. People who she knew would see the pictures and talk. The comments poured in. "Congratulations, sister. You deserve it." Godwin and Gussie read each one with the particular satisfaction of a woman who has been waiting a very long time to be seen. She did not think once about her days. She did not call. She did not send a message. She did not even in the quietest, most private corner of herself feel anything that resembled guilt. She had the villa. She had the marble floors. She had the comments. She was at last exactly who she had always believed she was supposed to be. She and Enika moved in on a Friday evening. They brought luggage. New furniture still in its wrapping, bottles of champagne, and the name of a caterer for the housewarming. And they were planning for the following weekend. The villa was dark when they arrived. The property manager had mentioned the electricity was being connected, but they had torches on their phones, and Ngozi was too intoxicated with the reality of ownership. To mind the darkness, she walked through every room. She ran her hand along the marble countertops. She stood in the master bedroom and looked at the ceiling and thought, "This is mine. Finally, this is mine." She did not notice that the gate had been locked behind them from the outside. She did not notice that the property manager, who had handled the sale, had not returned her last 3 messages. She did not notice until it was far, far too late that the recently renovated villa had no neighbors. Who had ever seen renovation trucks? No utility bills in any traceable name and no record in the official land registry that matched the papers she had signed. She did not notice any of this because she was busy standing in her marble kitchen celebrating. And that is where part one must pause at the moment. When Ngozi Okonkwo is standing in her stolen fortune in her fraudulent palace, with champagne in her hand and triumph in her chest surrounded by darkness, she does not yet understand, about to discover that the universe, which has no interest whatsoever in her justifications, has been listening to every word of this story. From the very beginning, the night is not finished with her yet. Not even close. She heard the first sound at 11:30, not a creak of settling wood, not the ordinary exhale of a new house adjusting to the weight of its occupants. This was something else entirely. A deliberate sound footsteps, slow and unhurried, moving across the floor directly above the master bedroom when Ngozi and Emeka had finally stopped their celebrating and laid themselves down on an air mattress they'd brought because the new bed hadn't been delivered yet. The champagne was half finished on the marble floor beside them. The torches on their phones had dimmed, and somewhere above their heads, something or someone was walking. Emeka sat up. First you hear that Ngozi said nothing. She was already very still, the way prey animals go still. Before the mind has finished processing what the body already knows, the footsteps stopped then from somewhere deeper in the house. A door opened not with a bang, with the careful practiced quietness of someone who knows exactly where they are and has absolutely no concern about who else might be present. And then there were voices low, unhurried, speaking in a dialect that Ngozi did not recognize, punctuated by the metallic sound that, once you have heard it, even once in your life, you never mistake for anything else. Emeka grabbed his phone, no signal. He tried the lights. Still no electricity. He went to the bedroom door and found it would not open from the inside. And it was at this exact moment, in the total darkness of a house that had never belonged to her, that Ngozi Okonkwo understood, with a kind of full-body bone-dissolving clarity that arrives only at the intersection of terror and consequence, that she had not bought a villa. She had bought a trap. Let the griot tell you what. Ngozi did not know what she had been, too blinded by greed and too drunk on vanity to discover with even the most basic investigation the property that beautiful, marble-floored photograph from every angle property had been used for the better part of 18 months as a transit house by a network that moved contraband through the Lekki corridor. The seller was not a seller. He was a recruiter. The middleman Emeka had found was not a middleman. He was a scout. The entire transaction had been engineered from the beginning as a mechanism to extract large sums of cash from eager, careless buyers who asked too few questions and signed too many papers, after which the buyer would arrive at their new property and find themselves very much in the wrong place at the wrong and extraordinarily dangerous time. It was, in the language of the street, a double trap. First they took your money, then they took everything else. And the men who came into the master bedroom that night were not interested in explanations. They were not interested in Ogosi's deed of sale, which she had scrambled to find in her bag, and was now holding up in the darkness, as though a piece of paper could stop what was already in motion. They were not interested in the fact that she was a woman, or that she was terrified, or that the champagne on the floor was barely touched. They spoke to each other, not to her. They moved with the efficiency of people conducting a routine operation in a space they controlled completely. They took the remaining cash. Ngozi had brought for incidental expenses nearly 400,000 naira in an envelope in her handbag. They took both phones, they took Emeka's watch and his car keys, and by extension the hired car parked in the driveway. And then they gave both of them a very clear, very quiet instruction. Leave through the back gate, do not turn around. Do not contact the police for 24 hours, and understand completely that the property they believed they had purchased was not and had never been theirs to purchase. Ngozi and Emeka walked out of that villa at 2 inches the morning, with nothing, no phones, no money, No car, still in the clothes they had celebrated in, and behind them, the gate clicked shut with the same finality as every door Ngozi had ever slammed in her sister's face. They walked for 40 minutes before they found a road. They recognized a maker flagged down a night bus. He begged the conductor for credit. They rode in silence to the one place left to go. A cousin of Ameka's in motion, who let them in without questions because it was 2 inches the morning, and the look on their faces made questions seem unnecessary. Ngozi sat on a plastic chair in a stranger's kitchen. In the middle of the night, in the city where 2 weeks ago she had been photographing herself in a marble doorway, and she had absolutely nothing. No villa, no 14 million, no tickets, no phone to delete the photographs from. No way to prevent the entire network of aunties and cousins and secondary school acquaintances she had tagged in her celebration posts. From seeing exactly what was happening next, she had 13 million naira worth of deed of sale for a property she could never set foot in again, signed with a name that would not be traceable, and not a single naira in her hand. Emeka, to his enduring credit as a man of consistent character, left by morning. He took the cousin's phone charger, borrowed 2,000 naira for transport, and was gone before Ngozi woke up. There was no note. There was when she thought about it clearly. Absolutely no reason she should have expected one. He had attached himself to her at the moment. She had money. She had no money. Now, the arithmetic was not complicated. She had lost everything in less than 12 hours of ownership in one night. In the first and only night she had ever spent in a house that was never hers to begin with, built on money that was never hers to begin with, taken from a sister who had done nothing except trust her. Now, we talk about the other side of this story. While Ngozi was sitting in a plastic chair in Mushin with yesterday's champagne still on her breath, Adaize Okonkwo had spent the previous 2 weeks doing what she had always done in the aftermath of damage. She got very quiet and she got very focused. She had gone to the lottery office herself, days after Ngozi had already collected, and she had told her story to every person in that building who would listen. She was told politely, and then less politely, that the ticket had been validly claimed and the transaction was closed. She filed a formal complaint anyway. She went to a legal aid office and spoke to a young lawyer, who listened to her with genuine attention and told her that her case was not impossible, difficult certainly, but not impossible, and that if her sister ever surfaced in a traceable way, there were avenues worth pursuing. Adaize had nodded, thanked him, and gone back to work because she had to eat, because rent was due, because falling apart was a luxury she had never been able to afford. But here is what was also happening. While Ngozi was busy becoming a cautionary tale, the people Adaize worked with had noticed not the lottery. She had told no one at work about the lottery. But her composure, her consistency, the shipping company's regional manager, a severe and observant woman named Miss Sakinola, had been watching Adaize for months, had seen the quality of her work and the steadiness of her character, and had decided the week after Ngozi disappeared with a ticket to offer Adaize promotion. Not a small promotion, a significant one with a salary increase that amounted to almost triple her previous earnings, a company apartment as part of the package, and a role that would require her to travel, to learn to grow into herself, in ways she had never been given room to do. Adisa had accepted without hesitation. She moved into the company apartment. That same week, she had a bedroom with a window that caught the evening light, a kitchen entirely, her own, a door she could lock, and in the nights when she lay awake, thinking about the ticket, and the drawer and the click of the front door, at 5 inches the morning, she held these things, the window, the kitchen, the locked door like anchors. The news about Ngozi came back through the family, the way bad news always travels through an auntie, over a phone call, with the particular breathless combination of horror and relish. That attends a story too dramatic to be delivered at ordinary volume. Auntie Chuma called Adaize on a Wednesday evening and told her everything: the villa, the gang, the night of terror, Emeka's departure, the plastic chair in motion. She waited for Adaize to react, to cry perhaps, or to express the shocked pity that the story seemed to demand. Adais was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Is she physically hurt, Auntie?" Chuma said, "No, no physical harm, all right." Adais said, "Thank you for telling me." That was all no satisfaction in her voice, no performance of vindication, just the calm, clear voice of a woman who had already processed this, who had understood since the morning she stood at the empty drawer, that the universe was not finished with this story, who had known, not with bitterness, but with the settled certainty of someone who has seen how the world actually works, that Ngozi's punishment was never going to require Adaeze to arrange it. Ngozi called 3 days later from a borrowed phone with the shaking, compressed voice of someone who has swallowed their pride. So rapidly, it has not yet fully gone down. Adaeze, long pause. I need help." Adaeze did not hang up. This is important. She did not scream. She did not deliver a speech. She simply said quietly, and without any particular heat, "You took my ticket, Ngozi." I know the voice on the other end broke slightly. "I know what I did, 14 million naira. You walked into my apartment in the night, and you took it." "I know. And you laughed." Adaeze said, "When Emeka called me small girl in my own house, you laughed, Sinons. I need somewhere to stay, Adaeze, just for a little while, until I can figure no." The word was not angry. It was not cruel. It had no jagged edges, no excess heat, no attempt to wound. It was simply the word that was true, delivered in the voice of a woman who had finally completely stopped making herself smaller to accommodate someone else's damage at the eyes. "Please, I have a new position. I have a new apartment. I have a new life that I am building from nothing with my own 2 hands, the way I have always had to build everything." She paused. "I cannot help you, not because I want you to suffer, but because I will not let you walk through another door of mine and take from me again. I cannot do it. I will not do it. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, Ngozi." And this was the truest, most devastating thing she could have said, because it was said with the gentle finality of someone who has genuinely stopped being responsible for another person's consequences, not with hate, just with release. She ended the call. Now hear this, because this is the part the grill wants you to sit with when Ngozi's photographs were still up on social media. The gate, the driveway, the marble kitchen, the dress, the caption that said, "Favor found me, God is good." People have been commenting their congratulations, but now as the story of the gang house and the lost money and the midnight walk and Emeka's departure spread through the family and through the neighborhood and through the secondary school group chats, when Ngozi had once printed, now those same people came back not with cruelty exactly, but with the specific gleeful exactness of people who had always quietly resented the performance and were now watching the stage collapse. Screenshots were taken, the photographs were shared alongside the story. Someone who knew someone who worked near the leaky property confirmed details. Someone else added that the police had actually been aware of the property and the network for months. Auntie Chuma, who was not a woman known for discretion, held a phone call that lasted 1 hour and 40 minutes and reached approximately 37 people before lunchtime. On a Thursday by the weekend, everyone who had ever seen Ngozi's celebration posts knew what had happened. Everyone who had clapped and praised and typed God when, in her comments, now had an answer to that question. And the answer was not for you. Not like this. Not with that. The community that had been meant to witness her triumph became instead in the audience. For the most public, most complete, most symmetrically fitting humiliation of her life, she had wanted to be seen. She was seen. She had wanted everyone to know she had arrived. Everyone knew exactly where she had ended up. She moved back to the village. Eventually not their village, but Emeka's, where his family took her in. Out of obligation and without warmth, where she slept in a back room and woke every day, to the sound of other people's lives moving forward. Without her, the aunties who had praised her photographs sent her no money. The cousins who had commented "you deserve it" did not answer their phones. The people whose attention she had bought with the promise of reflected glory He had no interest in her, in the currency of failure. She had gambled everything on a stolen ticket and a fraudulent palace, and a man made entirely of self-interest. And she had lost in the most total, most ironic, most precisely calibrated way imaginable, by being cheated exactly as she had cheated, by being robbed. Exactly as she had robbed, by finding herself at 2 inches the morning with nothing in her hands. Exactly as she had left her sister standing at an empty drawer. The universe, the griot tells you, does not forget it, does not hurry, but it does not make mistakes. Adeze Okonko in the company apartment, with the window and the locked door, was promoted again. 8 months later, she began saving. She found a small retail space near the port. Not large, not grand, but real, and entirely hers. And she opened her fabric shop. She had always had the eye for it. The business was modest at first, then steady, then genuinely good. She hired 2 young women from the neighborhood. She paid them well. She came home in the evenings to her own kitchen and cooked what she wanted and went to bed, without bracing for the next diminution, the next intrusion, the next cold voice telling her she was too small. For the space she occupied, she did not think about Ngozi every day. This is perhaps the most important thing. She did not nurse the wound. She did not build a monument to her own suffering or tend the anger the way some people tend an injury, pressing it constantly to confirm it still hurts. She let it become what all things become. When they are truly over the past a story, something that had happened to her and had not, in the end, broken her, she was by any measure that matters happy, not the fragile performed happiness of someone who needs to prove it to an audience. Just the real quiet, durable thing, the kind that doesn't require a caption. So, let the griot close this story with the words, it was always building toward the words that have been waiting. Since the moment Ngosi's hand closed around a ticket that did not belong to her, envy is a hunger that eats the one who carries it. It disguises itself as justice, as correction, as what you are owed, as the simple rearrangement of a world that has given too much to the wrong person. It speaks in the language of reason and the grammar of grievance. And it is convincing, and it is familiar, and it will walk you straight into a dark house and lock the gate behind you. The greedy do not steal from others, they steal from themselves. Every act of taking builds the architecture of their own undoing, brick by brick, with their own 2 hands in the dark, with nobody forcing them, and the ones left behind, the ones who are robbed and diminished and laughed at, and left at empty drawers at 5 inches the morning, they do not need to arrange the punishment. They only need to survive long enough to continue to keep their hands open, to go to work on Monday, to believe with the stubborn, irrational, completely correct faith of the genuinely good that the world is not finished writing their story yet. Adi's ticket was stolen, but nobody could steal what she was. The girl has spoken. Let those who have ears hear,